The other thing this week, we have obviously mounting. We're about to, I think, hit into an era in terms of the COVID, I think for the next like 2 months or so, where we see it migrate into rural communities, poor rural communities where they do not have the infrastructure. So almost like the equivalent of what we saw in some urban areas where, you know, the local public hospital has been either completely shut down or defunded in many respects. And we had higher rates of death in those areas because of it. In a state like New York, at least at one point, they were basically, you know, the resources were spread around a little bit, but still you can go and you can see the death rates were a function of what hospital you're at. When you're in rural, I don't, you know, name the state, as it starts to spread into those areas, you've got hospitals without ICU beds. You've got no hospitals. You've got no infrastructure to transfer people in an emergency. You know, like you can't, if you've got 5 or 6 people in there, you know, it's not going to work with medevac. And it's just, there's no resources. We could see this now migrate into areas that there's just no way of helping them. And on some level, like, I don't know how much we'll even hear about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I read an article this morning that just infuriated me about how in Q2, most health insurance companies, I'm forgetting the specific ones, but the giants doubled their profits as compared to last year. So you just see where the wealth is going. It's going to health insurers and certainly not being spread to rural hospitals. There are reports that rural hospitals are basically telling patients that are highest risk to just kind of go home and that if they can't help them, they just basically die there. I mean, that's the kind of healthcare that's being provided in these communities. It's terrifying. And this was completely predictable. I was reading articles in March about how rural hospitals just were not going to be able to deal with this, and all we got was screaming about how it's, you know, New York City and areas like that, and it was all New York's fault or whatever. But it spread. It was as predictable as it could be, and we're seeing the effects of it.
We're going to. We're also still waiting for the numbers to get the sense of what actual numbers have been going on. I mean, there have been reports that since they converted from reporting to the CDC and instead to the White House via a private enterprise, that at least like the hospitals are convinced that there's big gap. There are big gaps in the data. The hospitals are convinced that there's undercounting that's going on. So we don't even know. And still, we're still talking well over 1,000 deaths a day, still talking of, tens of thousands of new infections a day. We're at now over 160,000 people have died. Here is Tucker Carlson bemoaning the fact that we have even a concept of public health. I mean, this is what is just, this is just stunning to me. Here's Tucker Carlson, who I believe is held up in Maine, in the most remote part of Maine now. He bought a studio up there, or he wanted to buy a garage. I read some story about it. And it was in the local press. So here's this guy who is why doesn't everybody just go up to their very remote Maine house instead of having, some type of sense of public health policy?
The first tip was their resolute refusal to admit where the virus came from. When strong evidence emerged from Chinese scientists that the disease originated in a lab in Wuhan, our leaders immediately and adamantly dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. They didn't want to know more. Their first instinct was to defend China. They didn't want the Chinese system discredited. That seemed confusing, but we soon learned why. The Democratic political activist Zeke Emanuel was among the first to reveal how the left planned to use the pandemic to change the United States. Here he is on MSNBC 4 months ago this week.
Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications. Is all that economic pain worth trying to stop COVID-19? The truth is, we have no choice.
Oh, the truth is we have no choice. Except in a democracy, we always have a choice. That's why it's different from
I just wanted to be just catch up on what he's doing here, because he's making so many leaps here. It's fascinating. One, he's saying that the reason why the fact that it turns out not to be the case, but the reason why there was people were refuting that it came from a lab in Wuhan is because the Democrats wanted to transform America.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we have fealty and loyalty to the Chinese medical system. That's all the Democrats talk about. Progressives, it's Medicare for all, it's education, and Chinese labs. That's just, I can't get it off my mind. It's my number 3 or 2 priority. I don't know.
This is when Joe Biden was going to beat up God,
right?
He also was able to do something hinky with that lab in Wuhan. Like what?
He got juiced up there. He got roided up at the Wuhan lab and then went to go sock God in the face.
But what, I'm trying to think of what, because Tucker Carlson just throws out these disparate things, right? That he knows will trigger his QAnon following or whatever it is. But what possible connection could there be between how the virus got started, either in a lab or in a wet market in China or whatever, and what the Democrats plan to do with it? And it also turns out 4 or 5 months ago that Zeke Emanuel was sounding a lot more correct than he probably did 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah, it's here. And when he says there's nothing we can do about it, that's just a fact of the disease.
No, democracy will stop it. We live in a democracy, so we can just vote out coronavirus. He's right. The founders knew this. They knew it. God, those smart white men.
That's right. We have. Where's the vote on whether we should still have the virus? Here, continue.
Oh, the truth is we have no choice. Except in a democracy, we always have a choice. That's why it's different from an autocracy. In a democracy, on the big questions, the public gets to decide what the public wants. The people rule. That's the whole point of the American system. But the left had no plans to let the public decide anything. So instead, they issued resolute decrees. Remain at home. Wear a mask. Do not congregate with others. No one asked voters what they thought about any of this. Democracy played no role in it. The orders came down. Men with guns enforced the orders. The government used sophisticated technology to track down anyone who disobeyed them.
Pause it for one second. Just like this fucking lunacy is unbelievable.
Yeah.
First off, are we supposed to have a referendum on this stuff? Because if we want to have a referendum on this stuff, have it. 80% of the fucking population says wear a mask. The president of the United States was against masks, was trying to subjugate his own medical establishment, and the American people basically punished him for it, and that's why they changed their tune. How did the left manage to do all the shit that he's talking about?
And who are the men with guns? The men with guns right now are being sent by Trump to squelch protests in Portland and other cities. I don't understand. Does he recognize who controls the federal government? He's evoking imagery of paratroopers coming through and making sure you wear a mask, when the only equivalent thing that's actually happening there is Trump doing that to Black Lives Matter protesters, because there's no, what is he even drawing on there except for that exact happening? That's what's happening right now.
The only other place that there's been guns has been those white paramilitaries showing up at the State House in Michigan. And, if he's so concerned about democracy, we could have a vote, but people don't want to vote because they don't want to go out because it's dangerous in terms of the disease that he apparently doesn't think is real. But he can take a look at the favorability ratings of Gretchen Whitmer. He could take a look at the favorability ratings of DeSantis, who went the other direction. I mean, we can do this all day by any measure other than having some type of plebiscite, which nobody wants to engage in, which also contradicts his point. This is what the American people want. They want to be protected from the virus. And he has created this complete narrative that, I mean, you know, and I guess the reason why I'm getting so mad about it is there are people ostensibly on the left who continue to praise this guy, who is not just a liar, not just craven, not just doing this to amass power. And I don't know why he doesn't need any money. It's disgusting. It's disgusting to give this guy any type of credibility when he goes out and spews this type of lies that will get people killed, that has gotten people killed.
But he only, it's the comfort of theory. So he's in the comfort of his main home or whatever, but it's also just, you can make any argument when it's just purely theoretical. And so he connects all of these things that are not rooted in any fact. And there are all of these right-wingers that do this. Ben Shapiro is infamous for this, where he talked about how empathy has no place and shouldn't have any place in politics. Well, you know, you're like a poli-sci sophomore that's just operating in some sort of book, and you're not looking at things on the ground. And that's what Carlson's doing there, except the end result is killing people. Killing his elderly audience that loves him and listens to what he says.
Well, they know he knows they're staying inside. They are staying inside because they also don't want to die. Right. But they just, I don't know. Maybe they're just not critically thinking about this stuff. Is there any more? Play a little bit more and Lou, just let him finish his.
That's the end of it. That was the end of it.
I mean, it's just, I don't know why I get that mad about it, but it is. I think it's because this perception that somehow he's a truth teller.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
It bothers me too, because it was like a burrito of like non sequiturs and nonsense. Like he connected and threw in so many things that didn't make any sense and are not existing in reality, and then came to a specific conclusion that was also nonsense. Like usually on Fox, they'll take one premise or current event and then skew it in the wrong way. But he took eight and just put them all together to reach just such a BS conclusion. There's no way he actually even believes that.
Not at all. No, I know for a fact. I mean, I know for a fact that at least during the Iraq war, he had no compunction going on CNN, arguing in favor of the invasion, and then walking out the back door, having a cigarette and saying, like, I don't care about this at all.
Yeah, no, well, now he's a paleo conservative who really hates anti-intervention. Him and Tulsi Gabbard together, just two peas in a pod. He is one of the worst, I think, in terms of just like sheer cynicism. Like Sean Hannity, he's a lunatic and he's an idiot, but he actually believes it. He's like one of those end timers. I'm not saying this to his credit, but Tucker knows exactly what he's doing. And you can go back. He's smarter than Sean Hannity.
He's much smarter than Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
And you can go back to his speech in front of CPAC. And I don't know when this was, but he got up in front of CPAC and said, conservatives don't have genuine journalists. We need to, this is how he was starting the Daily Caller, I guess it was. We need to have real journalism to compete in the journalistic world. And he got booed. He got booed by the people there. And then I think like it took him like 3 or 4 months to realize like, yeah, that's not going to work. I'm going to go back to, and then you could, the trajectory is just amazing to go back and look at. This is like where, this is where somebody needs to do a biography of this guy, actually. Sit down with Blake Neff and have some in-depth reporting as to what's Blake Neff doing these days? What happens when you've reached the pinnacle of writing for a white supremacist on TV? Like, do you now got to go just like, do you start writing for OWN or something like that? What happens with that guy?
Maybe he'll join the Ellen DeGeneres writing crew or whatever's going on over there.
And he's just putting like little Easter eggs in her scripts.
Yeah, right.
Emma, as always, a real pleasure. I want to talk to you about the post office, but there'll be, I guess maybe we'll have time to do that in the future. Always a pleasure. Where can folks find you?
Just youtube.com/rebelhq, facebook.com/rebelhq. I post every work day. I take weekends off, guys. And you can watch my commentary on current events right now, because usually thought I was going to be on the road this year. That is not the case anymore. So not much on the ground coverage at the moment, but hopefully soon. Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Emma, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks so much. Bye.